All right, guys. Harish, Chris, you're there, right? I'm just going to start this. We're 2 minutes early, 2 minutes before 9, but we'll just start it anyway. All right, wonderful. You guys are here. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. This is another session of VSN Twitter Spaces at Bahas Bola. Your host is myself, Muhammad Yunus. And the topic for today is sports journalism, friend or foe. Together with us is two wonderful gentlemen, very experienced gentlemen in the field of journalism as well as PR. They are Harish Dio, the editor for 2213, as well as Christopher Raj, founder, CEO of Shekinah PR. I think you guys who are following football would know Christopher more as the person who is in charge of media, comms, as well as PR for the Football Association of Malaysia. That's the thing that we know about the both of them. But traditionally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them around 30 seconds to just introduce themselves. Let's start with Christopher, and then we go on to Harish. Christopher, Chris, you have 30 seconds. The floor is yours. Just a quick, brief introduction.
Thank you, Yunus. It's great to be here. Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Raj. I've spent a good number of years working in FAM as their media officer from 94 to 2002, and I spent a couple of years working in some PR agencies, and then about 5.5 years in New Straits Times, and then I started Shekinah PR in 2011. Well, that's it. 30 seconds.
All right, let's. Harish, 30 seconds. The floor is yours.
Hello, sorry. The line was a bit unstable, but anyway, my name is Harish. I'm the editor and co-founder of the news website 2213. Started my career in journalism as a stringer, and just climbed up the ladder, and yeah, now I pretty much run my own news outfit. And but at the end of the day, I've been a journalist for the past 21 years. That's about it.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Harish. Harish, the first thing we're going to do right now is I'm just going to throw the first question to you, Harish. And I think one of the main reasons why we brought it is because, primarily because what happened at Roland Garros with Naomi Osaka. Absent or boycotting the media, which has caused a square or space. So, do you find it difficult nowadays, mate, to get the truth from sports associations, events, or athletes?
Well, I wouldn't say before or after. I mean, it's always been. It boils down to trust. What I've learned throughout the years is that you just have to develop that relationship with whether it's an official or whether it's an athlete, and that relationship, the development of that relationship takes time. It's not one that you're able to do just over the phone or stuff like that. So the thing is that I hate to go to the usual conversation of during my days, that kind of conversation. But I would say this, that I was blessed that I was part of the hybrid media community, whereby I was taught by the elders, and I think one of the elders is in this room right now, Mr. Rizal Hashim. And from there, we developed that sense of going out, meeting people, establishing that relationship. And I understand the predicaments of the newsroom today, whereby the landscape has pretty much changed. So to answer your question, the relationship has always been there, as far as I'm concerned. And they have been truthful, or at least I would love to believe that they have been truthful to me. And I mean, yes, there have been instances whereby there have been half-truths, only for me to discover later. But generally speaking, it's always hearing what they have to hear. Otherwise, if they don't know something or if they are unclear, they will actually say it out loud that they know, because they know that some of us actually do our homework before we write an article or we publish it.
Okay, but I mean, if you talk about like developing relationships, right? At the end of the day, then what is required is for journalists or sports journalists to only write something which is favorable to the athlete or what their PR managers expect, and within that, to a certain extent, you know, create, I mean, of course, it will create a very positive relationship between you and the athlete or the entity. But then again, wouldn't that, affect your the story that you wanna share to the public?
Yunus, let me just give you a classic example here. Look, I started journalism in 2000, and you know, I've gone through quite a number of ministers, and that's always the case whereby, the people who guide the ministers often want journalists to, portray the rainbows and unicorns, so to speak. However, I have had the luxury of meeting these ministers, with the exception of Syed Saddiq, who preferred the BBC over local news, and we've never really, I never really got to speak to him. But anyway, to answer your question about the relationship, about so what I make myself clear, at least I can't speak on behalf of the others, but I make it very clear that my role there is a journalist. I'm not a PR practitioner. I don't do PR for anyone, and people want to read. I just give people what they want to read. If they have a different presumption, if they are unhappy with it, so be it, because I start the day telling myself that, you know what, Harish, no one is going to be perfectly happy with whatever you write. So, it's part of the game. It's part of the job. Yeah, so that's how I view it. I hope I've answered your question.
Okay, all right. I have a follow up question, but I'll reserve that for later. I think let's go to Chris first. Chris, I mean, controlling the message and the medium is the day to day job of a PR practitioner like yourself. Do you find that whenever you organize or whenever there's a sports press conference, do you think that it sometimes turns into something like a predatory affair? That the journalists are trying too much to dig answers which sometimes has no relations to whatever event that these athletes has just gone through?
Well, to start off, I think like what we always need to find the balance, and it comes to the relationship between the PR practitioner and the media personnel or the journalist. I think in my case, I was blessed because I was a journalist, and close to 15, 18 years of my life I spent working with the media personnel and people in the media industry. So when I started my business, it gave me a bit of, it gave me some advantages. I'm able to speak to them and put my thoughts and find a common ground, to put the narrative or put the message across board. But it's not a win all the time. You do get hammered, you do get questioned, and so forth. But eventually, I think there has to be respect, and that's what is important. Respect between the PR agency and the media. You can't get them to write what you want all the time. Neither at certain press conferences, it also can turn hostile, because as much as you may say as the moderator to that we stick to the questions related to the event, and any other questions we will take it after the PC, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Sometimes the journalists want to ask that question. They want to make it a point, and I've been in that situation before. We do get offended when PR people tell us you can't ask a question now, you ask after the event, and so forth. And sometimes the athletes or the officials, they just run away. They're not to be found. But in today's scenario, I think the landscape has changed. I think I can see a huge change in especially in the sports PR conferences these days. I think Harish will agree with me. In fact, Rizal will know, who's also in this forum now, that those days the PCs will be very very hostile. Because of the questions, the line of questioning, and we used to have some great journalists way back then, and they will really put the officials, on the spot, and find it very difficult. I think no PR agencies actually can manage those kind of situation. Ultimately, it comes to personality, to the individual who's able to manage that part of questioning or that part of the press conference. Um, but in saying that, I think ultimately it boils down to relationship. You respect the media, and in return, the media will respect you. You give the media what they are looking for, or at least guide them to the right channel instead of saying you don't have the answer, or you don't have the a link to for them to get their job done. And I think if you are able to do that, you're having a for the day.
Hello, Chris.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, I didn't get your last thing. You end up.
No, I was saying if you are able to put the balance together, you will end up having a good show for the day.
Okay, okay, all right.
Yeah.
My question to that, right? Like, because right now what I notice is that there's a lot of trend whereby you see national sports associations, sports clubs, or even the athletes themselves, like sharing news on their own private platforms, right? Whether it's on social media or their own personal websites, rather than going out to, sometimes you see news that is what we call newsworthy, sometimes not being published or not going through a press conference or a media release. It's just being released on their private platforms like a website or social media. Is that because do you think that growing trend is because there's a breakdown in that relationship that you're talking about?
Well, I think, yeah, there could be also confidence of athletes. Sometimes, certain, I'm not saying all, but there could be, a small percentage of media personnel who actually just extract stories out of sensational news, not finding out the fact or the background to that particular posting. Eventually, I think the athletes actually lose confidence in that particular journal or the media house, and they refuse to speak to them. And then you find they are literally posting their thoughts and their opinions on their social media platform. And I think we need to respect that. There's only so much you can actually control what the athletes want to say. I mean, I can give you one of the very good example is Kevin Durant. When he was playing for Oklahoma City, he refused to speak to the media. He always gave the media a tough time. And in one of his interviews, I remember on TV saying, "I'm only talking to you because I have to." As an athlete, he gave the media a tough time. But of course, over time, by the advice given his media advisors and so forth, he became transparent, and he engaged to the media very well when he played for Golden State Warriors. So you see the transition the athlete goes through, So our athletes also go through that. I mean, if you take like in the sense that the positive side of it, people like Nicole David, I mean, anytime there's a press conference or anytime there's again, it comes back to a journalist who has good relationship with them, you always end up getting a good story. But if the athletes find that not able to have that confidence level in that particular media personnel or media house, then they will just continue to write and post their opinions and thoughts on their platform, and eventually the newspapers or the portals will pick it up.
Okay, okay. Thanks, Chris. I want to go back to Harish. Harish, it's the same thing. I just want your opinion. There's the same question that I posed to Chris. trends are growing whereby, all these clubs and associations or even athletes are posting their news or their updates on their own private platforms. I mean, you talked about, the former Minister of Sport, Said Sadiq, eluding you from whatever press conference or whatever attempt for you to approach and get a statement from him. What do you do on your end as a journalist? I mean, how do you try to take an effort and trying to improve that kind of relationship, or it's just or it's your loss kind of
Okay,
approach?
Yunus, before I go, can you hear me now clearly? Because I received some feedback that some people couldn't hear me.
Oh, okay. I
Can,
can hear
yeah?
you, man.
Oh, okay, good.
Yep.
Now,
Yep.
to answer your question, 5 years ago, whatever that appeared, of 6 years ago, that is, whatever that appeared in the newspapers would appear on social media. Today, it's the other way around. If you're going to have this debate
Yeah.
about, which is right, which is wrong, it's going to be a never-ending debate. How do we skin the cat? First and foremost, I think you can only do so much on social media. Brands, and I say athletes are brands themselves. Organizations are brands themselves. They will do whatever it takes to get the numbers, to get the eyeballs. So they will do what they have to do. Media, on the other hand, will have to do what they have to do to try and get the different angle, the different story. Otherwise, you're going to be the same as everyone else. Having said that, I totally understand the problems my peers face. For example, if they miss out a story, and I have received, these are legit complaints, yeah, by my fellow peers, where they go like, if we write a story that is too hard hitting, we will not get news from this particular organization or from this particular athletes. When we go back to office, our editors will, scold us for not getting the story. I've had, these are legit complaints. Maybe not many want to talk about it, but these are legit complaints. I have the liberty of choosing what I want to write because I own my setup. But I feel for those who are working under an editor or within an organization where they are forced to churn out stories. So what do they do then? They are forced to actually just follow the norm and try and do whatever it takes to get the story and at the same time to maintain the relationship. Is that good or not? Look, that's a whole different conversation. I don't want to digress from this. But to answer your question about that whole social media and the mainstream media, and I would like to say that even online today is mainstream, yeah. The idea is to just reinvent and try and find a different angle. You have to entice your reader. You have to know your readers. You can't. The cake is no longer like it used to be, whereby, for example, the Star or NST, they had mass appeal. Today you've got so many. It's like different conversations by different demographics, by different pockets of people. So it's all about understanding your niche and targeting that niche. So it takes a different, once again, it's a different approach altogether. That's how I view it at the very least.
Chris, you got something to say, Chris?
No, I think
Oh, okay.
what I mean, I definitely agree with Harish. I mean, as a media platform owner, you are entitled for your own opinion, thought process. But like what he said, it's about time people or the sports association generally, they need to understand how the new media operates. And one of the biggest problem, a lot of these NSAs, they they don't know new media operates actually. How does the social media operates and how the news are derived and written about and the feedbacks that we get on this social media. Unfortunately, they keep maybe they don't want to have this or they have this attitude they're not interested to know. I think that's probably what it is.
Okay, all right. Thanks, gentlemen. Okay, to just before we go ahead, just want to mention to all the listeners that if you guys have any questions or you guys have any remarks that you guys would like to make, feel free to wave your hand and I'll bump you up from a listener to a speaker so that you could ask those questions yourselves to our featured speakers. Okay, gentlemen? Rizal Hashim, your name has been mentioned like a gajillion times already. Okay. All right. Next question that I have is in regards to the press conference, right? Now, when athletes tend to boycott and they tend to abandon the press release, it seems to me that nowadays, because of the multiple mediums that exist in this world, right? Private, especially the private setups like websites. What I mean by setups is their own personal website and own personal social media. I feel that the only manner or the best manner for journalists to churn out or to dig news, right, in relation to that particular athlete or club or agency is via a press conference. Um, is that the best platform, or is there any other? Is that now the best platform, or is there any other platform that you think that journalists should explore? Harish, can you start that?
Sorry, when you say platforms, what platforms were you mentioning earlier? The line keeps breaking. I'm sorry, Yunus.
Okay, all right. I was referring to
Yep.
press conferences, um, right, as the platforms, because of the trend that we were talking about, whereby athletes have their own private setups or clubs having their own private media setups, like their social media and website. It seems that it's really, really difficult for journalists to approach them. The recent case
Yeah.
with Naomi Osaka, who and even Kevin Durant, So
Okay.
what's your response to
Okay.
that, mate?
It's okay. Here's going to be a thought that I would like to put across. It's not my view. It's a thought that I would like to put across. Yeah. When it comes to the press, everyone says, "Oh, we have to pick and choose." I don't want to speak to you. But when it comes to a PR initiative, they all want the press to line up. So is that fair to the press?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
ask Chris
Number
that.
two, let's say for example, yeah, they are where they are today because of the writings that made them popular. They were given a particular platform. The minute those writings turn a little sour, and then like now, I'm not comparing. I'm not going back to the Naomi case because that's a very unique case. That's a different case for a different conversation altogether. Mental health is an issue. It should be discussed. It should be debated. But I'm talking about in not the Naomi context. I'm talking about in general. In general, they are not the non-Naomis who believe that they should pick and choose who they speak to. They only believe that they want to speak to people who are friendly to them. This is very apparent to, especially among officials, not so much to athletes, but officials. Now, so back to that question or that view that I put forward, yeah? When it comes to a PR initiative, they expect the whole world to kowtow. But when it comes to something pressing, they pick and choose. So is that fair to the media? Is that fair to the readers, in fact? To me, I don't think so.
Okay, all right. Chris, do you think that's fair, Chris? Because I mean, you
Yeah.
are on the other side as a PR practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think
Yeah.
controlling who the athlete or the club speaks to is fair, or
Mm-hmm.
it should be it's a fair practice on the PR side?
No, it is not a fair practice. I mean, just like the journalists who have ethics and code of conduct they work on. I think as a PR practitioner, we too have our ethics and code of conduct that actually is governed by us. I mean, everybody has a kind of a governing association that puts the rules and regulation how a PR practitioner actually conforms his duty and his responsibilities. But definitely, from what Arish is saying, it is very unfair. It is not right. Um, that's why, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, the key word here is respect. The respect that the agency gives to the media and the respect the agency receives from media. I think it goes hand in hand. Sometimes there are also personal elements involved across the board. We should not actually bring it in terms of the job is concerned. The job is professional. The job has to be done. But I've been in situation where certain athletes have also told me they don't want to speak to that particular media outfit. It has happened in the last 15 years of my career, and then we, as much as even we try to talk to them and justify, they just don't want to speak to them, you know. So ultimately, we have responsibility towards the client, and the instruction comes from the client. You know what I mean? Yeah. And in some cases, I mean, we are told to seek a media house for some interviews, and sometimes what I do, I've done in most cases, and I think my media friends out there will know that I've always tried to um, speak to my client reasonably and get them some additional time for other media outfit to speak to them. And this has happened in many occasions, from that we have done. We always try our best to accommodate as much as we can. But of course, when you come to a press for FIFA and the World Youth in India, my opening game, Brazil and Argentina, had 1,950 journalists in the press conference room, and we can only accommodate maybe about 20 questions, because you have 15 minutes for the live TV I mean, it goes on air, and you got 1,850 people sitting in front of you. So then comes back again, you're not able to give everybody an opportunity. So, but from a PR standpoint of view, yes, um, you have to find ways and means to give the best that you can to that particular across board, and also the media houses, and find a way to establish that relationship.
Chris, when you mentioned that normally it's the client, i.e., the athlete or the association that you represent. Those are the people who would tell you that they would not want to speak to a particular journalist, right? Um, is that not a it's not it's not is that not a strategy that's adopted as well by a PR agency to advise their client not to speak to a particular journalist, as it might turn into a PR crisis or conflict?
Well, of course, from a PR perspective, we advise um, the reason for the we in an occasion, a client had a legal issue with a particular media house. Much later, I found out actually the client was suing the media house for a wrong for false reporting, and therefore the client did not want to give the media house an opportunity to interview the athlete that they were representing, or the athlete representing them. So sometimes there are also background stories to that, and as an agency, there's only so much you can do. Yeah. And that puts you in a very difficult position, because I mean, uh, I, very close friend of mine, being a journalist and whatever not, and I know if it happens to him in that situation, as a friend, I will definitely feel very very disappointed, not able to give him that opportunity. And this happened. This happened when we brought a player for a tour here. He was just here for 5 hours, and the club said, you can only give. We only have 7 spots, so identify the seven. And then you send the list to UK. They say no, this. They give you another 7 names, which they themselves are not aware of, which are the media houses. So you're always in this kind of situation, especially when you're doing a very very big event. But I think as a communication person, you should able to put forth, argue your case professionally, and say what are the reasons that you would like to give opportunity for the following individuals or media houses, and you can only pray and hope that they will listen to you. Not forgetting actually the event belongs to them. And I don't own the event. The event belongs to somebody else. I'm only a bridge trying to manage both parties, from the media stake point of view, and also the client stake point of view. And And well, of course, we've been criticized. I must say that for maybe once or twice we've been criticized for not able to deliver certain requests from the media houses. But I take it in my stride, and that's what it is.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Chris. Harish, I want to go back to you, mate. Well, is there anyone interested to ask question? No. Okay. Harish,
Yep.
back to you. I notice nowadays there's a lot of, those during those times when I was much younger, you can only see the writings of those journalists in the agency that they represent,
Yeah.
the press, right? Nowadays, journalists would have their own um, blog, or they have their own social media space, which people tend to follow. Um, does that affect the dynamics with the journalist and the agency that journalist is representing? How does the relationship work in that sense?
Yunus, to be honest with you, blogs have been around for quite some time, lah. So, this is a conversation that we even had like, 10, 15 years ago when there was one time where blogs were the new thing and it was pretty much thriving. Uh, to answer your to answer your
But but
question,
but it's a
yeah,
bit more,
no,
mate. But it's a bit more, like Harish, because of the social media. There's a lot of huge following going on, social media platforms of
yeah,
journalists
true.
nowadays, right? Blogs,
True. So
yes,
going back to
okay.
the conversation of what happened in the past, and I remember this very clearly. We were all in the newsroom, and we were actually encouraged to start blogs because at that time there was this radical shift whereby you are not associated to the brand as in the organization, but the brand would like to leverage on you as a writer. So you saw that shift in the way people viewed journalism. It's same thing like what we see abroad as well. You look at the newscasters, you look at the journalists, and then you associate them with the brands, and the brands were happy with it because they were building their own assets. Likewise, it's the same conversation today, whereby you see journalists being really active, not so much on blogs per se, but on social media, for example, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok. These are actually ways for the organization. Look, if I were to run, I am running my own organization, and if I have my team who are active on social media, I'd be happy because we are leveraging on them as well, and they are our mini ambassadors. In fact, they are not even mini; they are our ambassadors. So that's how I view it.
Harish, but doesn't it mean that, like, your readers or your
Yeah.
listeners or your consumers are later gonna abandon those agencies and follow those
Nah,
journalists
you,
themselves?
you know what? At the end of the day, the journalists need a platform to be credible. Some of them do it on their own and they maintain that well and good. But most of us, we rely on an organization simply because it adds credibility. I mean, take for example, Twitter. If you want to get verified, they will ask you a whole lot of questions, including sample articles of on famous platforms, for example, and so forth and so on. Accreditation card, for example. So it's the same thing as well. And readers are more educated these days. I will because they know the difference. They follow someone because of that person's views, and at the same time they want the credibility of an organization. So I believe it still works hand in hand.
Yeah, but well, credibility, yep, is
Hmm.
important. I understand, but credibility to a certain extent also limits the journalist, or to say or to disclose whatever he or she wants to, because he or she needs to maintain that credibility. So when she goes out on social media, the vibe or the type of content that comes out is different, and that to a certain extent attracts a group of followers, a significant group of followers. Do you think, um, you know how do you manage this kind of dynamism?
Look,
How
Yunus,
best would
I
an
think I
agency
know what you're
manage?
saying, and this is a conversation I had with some friends not too long ago, and my reply to you would be this: it's for the journalist to decide whether the journalist wants to be known as a journalist or wants to be known as a person who can get the most likes or retweets. So you decide. Yeah.
Okay.
You want to be
Okay.
Insta
All right.
famous or Twitter famous, or you want to be a journalist? It's as simple as that.
Okay. All right. Great. 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 Chris. Chris. Sometimes you find this journalists, moving away from, or having their own private platforms, right? Creating
Yep.
so much,
Yep.
nightmare. Can I call it nightmare to, a club or an athlete's, PR? Um, how do you mitigate those kind of situation when there's so much news coming up in relations to the club or to the athlete that you're representing? How do you manage? How do you manage this? What's the best way?
Well, in communication, there are a set of rules that we actually speak to the. I mean, whether it's an athlete or client, I just say the word client, yeah. And then, we tell them how to go about it and what needs to be done. But I mean, we could see. I mean, if we take there was some news going on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, commenting on one or two of our athletes who were actually on social media 6 or 7 hours before their matches started at the Tokyo Olympics. Now, those kind of posting or social media engagement at midnight or wee hours of the morning, obviously it brings a lot of criticism towards the athlete. I mean, if you have a game at 11 a.m. and you are still on a TikTok or on your Instagram at about 1:30 or 2 a.m. in the morning, I mean, you're supposed to be resting. What do you expect the journalist to do? Write good things about you? I don't think so. I mean, even if it was my client, I will definitely um, I'll definitely tell off the particular athlete. I mean, this is not what you should be doing. You should be resting. You should be doing what you should do as a professional athlete, and not to be on your social media. And you can't blame the journalist if somebody picks it up and makes a story out of it, because he's actually writing the fact. Like what Adi said, you decide what you want to be. You want to be a journalist or you want to be Insta famous. That kind of thing. But again, I will come back again to people like Dato Nicole David and Dato Lee Chong Wei and so forth. I mean, you can see how professional they were, the respect, the high level of respect from journalists to Dato Nicole. I mean, they are national icon. They've gone through brand endorsement, sponsorship, and they are who they are. They have somehow managed to keep their way professional. Unfortunately, the younger athletes today are not there yet. And I don't know, maybe National Sports Council or Olympic Council of Malaysia should have engage, media trainings for these athletes, so that they know how to deal with situations. They know how to deal with the media. They know what to do, especially when they are in important competition. What they say, what they write, pictures that they post. I mean, makes it's very important. I mean, you can't be having a IG live at 12 midnight. I mean, I found it very strange. Athletes having IG live at 12 midnight, 8 9 hours before their first game. I mean, it doesn't happen. You don't find the Great Britain athletes or the Netherlands cyclists or whatever it is. You don't find other athletes from other parts of the world doing it. So again, this comes to exposure, comes to training. It comes with that responsibility that you are representing me, and you need to be professional in your way. Like I said, maybe MSN, I mean NSE and OSIM should conduct media trainings for future Olympians who probably going to Paris or to LA. There's only so much a PR practitioner can do. Ultimately, despite the advice given, if the athlete refuse to listen to you or do what they want to do, like example I give you, Kevin Durant, he just wanted to do what he wanted to do. He just blasted media whenever they called him for interview. It took him 4 5 years to change himself, to change his attitude before the media loved him. So yeah, that's what it is.
Oh, it seems to me that there's when it comes to any kind of crisis, it's all it's all about the client. It's all about having to mold the client to become a lot more professional and to be a lot more friendly to the media.
True,
Um,
because you sometimes these athletes, they also don't understand how the media works. So if you don't understand how the media work and you don't understand how what the media is expecting from you, you're going to be in trouble, isn't it? You're going to be in trouble, and a wrong message will put you in trouble. I mean, if you get a senior, seasoned journalist like Harish, maybe Harish might just guide that particular athlete. Hey, you should not be saying this to me. Maybe I don't know, but somebody else might not be doing that. I mean, if they say the wrong thing, somebody might pick it up, not even guiding these young athletes. So you're always in this kind of situation, and you need to find the best way to resolve the issues and problems. Like I said, continuous media engagement, continuous media training, hopefully will assist the athletes to do better.
okay, all right. Thanks, Chris. All right. Before we proceed, I just want to ask. Chris actually only has 5 more minutes because he needs to go off, and I think we'll be ending this session a bit earlier. So I'm just going to open the floor to the listeners. If you guys have any questions that you guys want to ask or remarks that you want to make, please feel free to wave your hands, and I'll bump you up as a speaker. Okay. Um, while we wait for this question, I just want to ask something really, that's been really bugging me. I notice a lot that sometimes when a lot of you find journalists or non-journalists um, going on social media or their respective platforms or agency churning out news which are not favorable to the client. Um, Sometimes you see client not, at the end of the day, taking up these journalists or these social media influencers, right, to join their media department or comms department. Um, is that a healthy thing? Let's start with Chris.
Well, I think it's not a very healthy thing to do. Um, I mean, whatever the organization wants to achieve in terms of their communication, they need to set out their strategies correctly, and they got to put the strategy in place. I mean, if you think by just getting a guy who runs a Facebook page with 50 likes, that's going to help you to run your communications unit. I think that's a huge mistake. That's really a big mistake, because that person who's writing or owning a Facebook page or a sports portal, you got to ensure this person has that experience. I mean, I think people like Harish, Rizal, and some listeners who have been in the media industry will agree that writing, yes, it is one part of the communication tool that you need, but there's also other elements of communication that's needed to run a particular organization. Your strategy, your medium, long term, the I mean, a lot of components are involved. Um, and if that particular person doesn't have those components or those elements, how are you going to help the organization? Already the organization is in difficulty, and you are supposed to ensure that your experience is supposed to help that particular organization, but instead you become a burden, So I don't think it is, personally for me, I don't think it's a great idea, but unless there's some kind of relationship shared by the organization and that particular person, then so be it. I mean,
Or maybe it's a desperate move. Chris, do you think?
well, maybe it's a, I mean, I don't know. Maybe, like, whether it's a desperate move or it's a move to keep peace with some people, I'm not sure, but I think, like, at large, the organization needs to think of um, a proper communication process for them to grow. I mean, like I said, it is always a long term in anything, it's the different stakeholders of the game. It is always a long term relationship.
Mm.
And that's why, like what Harish correctly said, he's able to call Lee Chong Wei on the phone and have a chat with him is because Lee Chong Wei respects Harish and Harish respects Lee Chong Wei, and there's a long term relationship in that and mutual understanding and agreement. And that is something today that people have to strive to build. If you don't build it now, especially for our yeah, if they don't build it, then it's going to take a while for them to get into that kind of system.
Okay, all right. Harish, mate, what do you think in those kinds of circumstance when there's a when journalists or people in the social media starts coming up with attacks after attacks on a club or an athlete? Do you think it's a healthy thing for these clients to just hire these people to make them a little bit more friendlier?
Look, let's not kid ourselves. It's happening. It's been happening. It happens in other parts of the world. First and foremost, let's go back to the so-called attacks, lah. To me, it's good because at the end of the day, it shows that people are passionate about your club or your entity. So that in fact is a good sign. Although it may be seen as attacks, but it's good. People are passionate. People are willing to talk about you. That invest their time into attacking you. That's valuable. Number two, to ask them to jump ship or to change alliances, so to speak. That's pretty much very political, isn't it? It's happening right now in the political scene. So look, at the end of the day, it's all about principles, and journalists, we are all bound by our ethics, by our principles. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the others, but as far as journalists are concerned, we are quite clear as to where we stand with regards to such matters.
Do you think, Harish, it disrupts the truth from getting out to the public, or this is just pure one or two journalists venting out?
No,
What is it?
look, forget about the equation of journalists first, yeah? People are supposed to voice their opinions. Twitter has become into this space whereby we only want to follow people who are of the same opinion as us. The people with dissenting opinions, we just block or unfriend or don't follow. That's wrong. In fact, we should be listening to all forms of conversations to understand the subject matter or the issue better. That's one. Now, why should brands shriek when it comes to instances whereby they've been attacked? They should not, whether it's a brand, whether it's an entity, whether it's an organization or an individual. Because to me, it's a reflection mode. Now, some of the attacks can be overboard, personal. You have to sieve those attacks out. Unintelligent comments, it's surprisingly, they're the ones with the most retweets but or likes on whatever platforms. Nevertheless, you have to be smart in sieving through those comments. And some of the comments actually make a whole lot of sense. So I just want to go back to your title of your, conversation today, Sports Journalism, Friend or Foe. And to touch on your question and on the topic today, I would say that, we are actually your best friend, because only a best friend would tell you on your face that you've done something wrong. Everyone else would just talk behind your back.
Yep.
So,
Okay, I understand. So I guess like clients, like athletes or sporting association should not celebrate this friendship by hiring, by asking them to jump ship, but just remain wherever you are and give out those comments, right?
Well, I think as long as associations or athletes or clients, they must know the truth, and you must embrace that when the truth is told, you must be able to accept it and find ways to work around it, and and not what you say jump ship and so forth. I hope it doesn't happen to sports in that way. I mean, we know like it's happening in other parts, in other sectors of this country, but hopefully not in sports. But like I said, the truth must be told, and from a PR perspective, I personally appreciate the truth being told, even to our faces directly, and what needs to be done. And I think it is important, to continue to listen to those opinions and feedback, and have humility to understand and to learn. Because I think the problem starts when you think you know everything, and that's when the trouble starts. Yeah,
All right. Okay. Thanks, Chris. I think
most welcome.
I think when people tend to appreciate so much, maybe that's the reason why they start bringing in and encouraging people to like what Harry says, jump ship. Because those because a lot of times you may want these people to join in the institution and try to make that change from within. Let's assume it that way. Yeah. Okay. I think Chris, thank you very much. We're going to end this session soon
Thank you.
already.
Thank you for
Sorry,
having me on board.
Chris,
Yeah.
and this session already. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Harish. Before I sign out, before I let you guys off, for VSN 2030, VC Sukarnegara 2030, as a PR practitioner, as Chris, Harish, as a journalist, as a sports journalist, what is this one statement that you want to see in the blueprint of VC Sukarnegara? Harish, let's start off with you.
Continuity.
This been said like many times throughout these sessions. Yes, continuity. Okay, Chris, what is this one thing that you want to see in the blueprint?
I think I said this before. What I'm looking at is progression and sustainability. I think it's important to sustain whatever is being created, and not changing the plans every 5 years or every 10 years.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much for your input, and thanks for joining me in Twitter Spaces. I know you guys are very busy, but thank you for making the time. To all the listeners, thank you very much for tuning in to VSN 2030 Twitter Spaces via Bahas Bola. This is Muhammad Yunus, your moderator or host for this program. We're around every week, so keep tuning in. We'll share you on Twitter on what's the next topic for this week. Thank you very much, and have a good day ahead. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ari.
Thank you, Yunus.
Most welcome.
Thank you, Harish.
Bye,
No worries.
everyone.
Good night.